Hey everyone, in this video we're going to learn about two-way frequency tables. So far, all the statistics that we've done has been based off numerical data. Whether it was the number of hours we studied, our test score, our height, all of those were numerical values. But what if the data we had was categorical, such as the answers to what is your favorite color, what is your favorite class? How can we represent that type of data? And that leads us into a two-way frequency table. So our first example, a group of college freshmen and sophomores were given a survey to determine if they preferred morning or afternoon classes. The table below shows the results of the survey. Okay, so this is an example of a two-way frequency table. Along the side, we have the year that the student's in, so either freshman or sophomore. Across the top, we have their preference on classes, so either morning or afternoon. And then you can see along the edges, we have a bunch of totals. So here we have the total number of freshmen, total number of sophomores. Then we have the total number of students that preferred morning classes, that preferred afternoon classes. And then the bottom right-hand corner is the total number of students that participated in the survey. So the reason this is categorical data is each student had to answer two questions. Were they a freshman or a sophomore? And then did they prefer morning or afternoon classes? And then all of that data was tallied to create the numbers that we see here in the two-way frequency table. Now, once we have a two-way frequency table, we're asked questions based off of the table. So how many total students were surveyed? So that's the value in the bottom right-hand corner. So 180 total students. How many sophomores were surveyed? So if we go across the sophomore row, we see there's 75 total sophomores that were surveyed. How many students preferred morning classes? So if we go down the morning column, we see 85 students preferred morning classes. Of the students who were freshmen, how many preferred afternoon classes? Okay, so now we're only focused on the freshmen, and we want to know how many freshmen preferred afternoon classes. So that is 45. Okay, so these questions just required us to read values off of the table. Working with that same table, round each of the following to the nearest percent. What percent of students surveyed preferred afternoon classes? Okay, so percent is part over whole. So for this percentage, we want the number of students that preferred afternoon classes over the total number of students. Okay, so we'll say afternoon over total. Okay, so finding those values, 95 students preferred afternoon classes. There were 180 students total. We need to multiply by 100 to create a percentage. So we'd use our calculator here. So 95 divided by 180 and multiply that by 100. So we have 52.7 repeating. And we're told to round to the nearest percent. So that means 53% of students surveyed preferred afternoon classes. What percent of sophomores preferred morning classes? So here we're only focused on the sophomores. So we want the number of sophomores that preferred morning classes over the total number of sophomores. Okay, so sophomores that preferred morning classes, that's 25. The total number of sophomores is 75. And we can multiply that by 100. Now we don't need the calculator here. This would be 1/3, which is 0.3 repeating, and then times 100. But just to show you what that would look like, 25 divided by 75 in the calculator, multiply by 100, and we have 33.3 repeating. Rounded to the nearest percent, so that means 33, let's fix that 33% of sophomores preferred morning classes. What percent of students that preferred afternoon classes were freshmen? Okay, so now we're focused on just the afternoon class column. Okay, and we want to know out of all the students that fall into this column, so out of the 95 students, how many were freshmen? Okay, so we look and we see there that value would be 45. and we want to turn that into a percentage. So there was 45 freshmen that preferred afternoon classes out of the total 95 students that preferred afternoon classes, times 100. So we have 45 divided by 95, and we'll multiply that by 100. So we have 47.3, and a few more digits after that. We'll round to the nearest percentage, so 47% of students that preferred afternoon classes were freshmen. Okay, so essentially the first part of the question is setting up the total, right? What we're dividing by. So in this case, we're dividing by the number of students that preferred afternoon classes. In the previous case, we're dividing by the total number of sophomores. And then we have to find the value, in this case, the number of freshmen that preferred afternoon classes. In the previous example, the number of sophomores that preferred morning classes, to set up these percentages. But as long as we're able to decipher what values we need from the table, then the setup is the same each time. We're multiplying by 100 to create a percentage, and then rounding to whatever they tell us to. Our next example, a school surveyed some of its students to determine their burrito preferences so they could plan a burrito day. The results of the survey are summarized in the table below. So along the side, we have whether they prefer guacamole or no guacamole in their burrito. And then across the top, whether they prefer steak, chicken, or tofu in the burrito. And then we see along the sides, we have totals, total number of students that want guacamole or prefer guacamole, total that does not, total number that prefer steak, chicken, tofu, and that bottom right-hand corner is the total number of students that the school surveyed. So let's answer those follow-up questions. How many students were surveyed? So that bottom right-hand value, that's 220. How many students preferred guacamole on their burrito? So that would be 135. Go across the guacamole roll. Of the students who chose chicken, how many preferred no guacamole on their burrito? Okay, so chose chicken, you'd be in this column, and then the number of students that preferred no guacamole, that's right here, that is 50. Of the students who preferred guacamole, how many chose tofu for their burrito? Okay, so guacamole means you're in this row here, and the number that chose tofu would be 25. Okay, so again, all these questions are just seeing if we can read the table correctly. Same table, round all answers to the nearest percent. What percent of students surveyed chose steak for their burrito? Okay, so we're going to do part over whole again. So percent of students surveyed chose steak. So the total number of students that chose steak was 65. The total number surveyed was 220 times 100 to turn it into a percent. So 65 divided by 220 times 100, and we could do this all in one step if we chose to. So 29.54, 29.5, round to the nearest percent. So that's going to be 30% of students chose steak for their burrito. Now, if you're going to do it all in one step in the calculator, just make sure to put parentheses around that division. And I can do that in the next example to show you what that would look like. What percent of students that chose tofu preferred guacamole? Okay, so we're only focused on the students that chose tofu, and then we're looking out of those students, how many preferred, or what percentage preferred guacamole. Okay, so let's figure out that total first. So the total number that chose tofu was 35. So that's our denominator. That's the total we're working with. And then in this column, how many students chose or preferred guacamole? So that would be 25. And then times 100. Okay, so going to our calculator, so we'll use parentheses now. So 25 divided by 35, and then times 100. So 71.4. And a few more after that. So rounding to the nearest percent, that would be 71%. So 71% of students that chose tofu preferred guacamole on their burrito. Based on the sample, predict how many of the school's 1,500 students would choose chicken for their burrito. Okay, so we want to find a percentage and then multiply it by the 1,500. Okay, so let's first figure out what percent chose chicken in the school or in this survey. So 120 students chose chicken or preferred chicken in their burrito out of the 220 students in the school. So 120 out of 220. Okay, so this gives us the decimal equivalent of the percentage, which is what we need. And then we're going to multiply that by 1,500. Okay, so parentheses, 120 divided by 220 times 1,500. That's going to tell us how many students we can predict would choose a chicken burrito. So 818.18. Okay, and we are dealing with students, so we would never round up, just always use the whole number that we get, so 818 students. Okay, so based on the survey that the school gave, they can predict that 818 students would choose chicken for their burrito. And that's going to help them plan how much of each to order. A statistics class surveyed 210 middle school students to determine if they preferred reading or listening to a book. The results of the survey are shown in the table below, but some values are missing. Complete the table, then answer the questions that follow. Okay, so they've given us an incomplete two-way frequency table. So our first job is to find all the missing values. And that shouldn't be too hard for us to do. Okay, so for instance, looking right here, the total number of 7th graders is 116. We're missing the total number of 8th graders, but we know when we add them, we have to get 210. Okay, so we can use our calculator, right? 210. Let's get that calculator back. 210 minus 116. And we have 94. Okay, and then we can go across here. The number of 8th graders that prefer to read a book plus the number that prefer to listen, which is 59, has to be equal to 94. So we can do 94 minus 59. So we don't need a calculator for that one. That's going to be 35. Okay, and then we can add down to get the total number of students that prefer to read. So that would be 107. And we find this missing value in two ways. We'd either add down the column or add across the row. Doesn't matter. So let's go 72 plus something has to be 116. So we can do 116 minus 72. So that would be 44. Okay, so there we have the completed two-way frequency table. And now we can answer the follow-up questions. Round to the nearest percentage or whole number. What percent of students who prefer to read a book were in 7th grade? Okay, so we're looking for the percentage of students who prefer to read a book. So that's our total. So the total number of students that prefer to read, 107. That's our denominator. And then we're looking for the number of those students that were in 7th grade. So that's right here, that's 72. And we're going to multiply that by 100 to convert it into a percentage. So 72 divided by 107. I forgot parentheses, so I'll just hit enter and then multiply by 100 after. So we have 67.2. So rounding to the nearest percentage, so that's 67% of students who preferred to read a book were in 7th grade. Based on the sample, predict how many of the school's 600 8th grade students would prefer to listen to a book. Okay, so we're focused only on the 8th grade. So the total number of 8th graders is 94. So that's our denominator. That's the total that we're working with. And we want the students that prefer to listen to a book. So there's 59 8th graders that prefer to listen in this survey. And then we're going to multiply that by 600 because there's 600 8th graders. We're trying to figure out how many of them would prefer to listen. Okay, so parentheses 59 divided by 94 times 600. And we can hit enter. So we have 376.59, 376.5. Now in this case, they told us to round. Okay, so we don't have to even think. It says round to the nearest percentage or whole number. So if that's the case, well then we're going to round that up, and there's going to be 377 students that we can predict that would prefer to listen to a book that are in the 8th grade. If they didn't tell us to round, we would have said 376, right? Because we still don't have a complete person. We don't ever want to round up unless they tell us, like they did in this example. There are 300 middle school students attending a coding summer camp. There are 160 campers who prefer to code in Python. 90 of those campers are in 7th grade. There are 50 8th grade campers who prefer to code in Java. Create a two-way frequency table to summarize the data. So here we're on our own. They've given us a few values, right, from the survey that they gave, and we need to put the rest together. Okay, so I can see we have 7th and 8th grade, Python and Java. So that at least helps us get our sides. So I'll go 7th and 8th along the side, and then Python and Java along the top. This column is going to represent totals. This row will represent totals. Okay, so 300 middle school students. So we know, use a different color. There are 300 in total. 160 campers who prefer to code in Python. So the total in this column needs to be 160. 90 of those campers are in 7th grade. So 90 fall right there. 50 8th grade campers who prefer to code in Java. So there's 50. Okay, so everything in green is what we've gotten out of the word problem. And now I'll use the purple marker to fill in the rest. These are the values that we have to come up with on our own. So the first thing I see going down this column, the number of 8th graders that prefer to code in Python is going to be 70. Right? 90 plus 70 is 160. That means the total number of 8th graders is 120. The total number of campers that code in Python plus the number that prefer to code in Java needs to be 300, so this needs to be 140. Then the 7th graders that prefer to code in Java, that would be 90. And the total number of 7th graders is 180. Let's fix that 8. 180. Okay, so it's essentially like we were solving a numerical puzzle. We were first tasked with actually setting up the two-way frequency table, right? So we had to decide what the categories were. So 7th and 8th grade was one, Python or Java was the other. Then we filled in the green values that were given to us, and then we figured out all of the purple values. So that is a two-way frequency table, and it just shows us how we can represent categorical data, especially since we've been working so much with numerical data. So try a few examples on your own so that you're comfortable both reading and interpreting a two-way frequency table and creating one on your own. Click the Amazon link down below for my algebra workbook so you can practice on your own. Give the video a like, and before you go, click that subscribe button so you can see more videos just like this. Thanks for watching.